Hello, and welcome to Snail Story. How are you doing today? Is it sunny where you are, or is the sky still heavy with snow and rain? The story we're about to hear will take you back to the misty hills of Old England, where a merciless will forced Lord Adrian Redwyck to confront the truth. Is love something that can be tested, or only safeguarded through trust? And on the other side, Lady Evelyn of Ashbourne will prove that a home does not survive on wealth alone, but on a heart willing to keep the fire alive. If you enjoy slow and heartfelt love stories like this, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Snail Story, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. That morning, a veil of mist lay thick upon the hills of Redwyckshire. A silver drapery stretched all the way to the horizon. Redwyck Hall, ancient and dignified, rested in the mellow glow of its hearth, like some fabled castle where time walked slowly and the solemn eyes of ancestral portraits followed each passer-by. Along the carpeted corridors, the pendulum clock tolled, each deliberate strike reminding all that promises, however noble, must one day come due. Adrian Redwyck stood at the tall window, his hand brushing the polished dark wood, worn smooth by generations of touch. The mingled scents of pine, of tooled leather from the bindings, and the faint aroma of rose tea from the adjoining chamber composed the fragrance of a world long gone. Pale light revealed the scar, tracing his jawline, the remnant of youthful recklessness, of wild hunts beneath the oaks when the winds still called his name through folly. "My lord," murmured Mrs. Alderton, the housekeeper, bowing softly at the threshold. Her voice spun of wool. "The solicitor has arrived. Mr. Percival has come with him." "Show them into the library," Adrian answered, his eyes still fixed upon raindrops that pinned themselves to the glass like silver needles. "And see the fire is well fed." "Yes, my lord." The library of Redwyck Hall was its very heart, bookcases carved with patterns, a mahogany table shining as if it were a lake, armchairs clothed in deep velvet green. Over the mantel hung a great portrait of Sir Thomas Redwyck, Adrian's grandfather, a man of cold gray eyes, upright shoulders, and hand set upon a sword hilt, as though he might yet step forth to correct the stance of a grandson found wanting. Mr. Holloway, the solicitor, whose hair had whitened with the years, placed a small wooden coffer upon the table, unsealing an envelope of red wax stamped with the Redwyck falcon. Percival Harrow, Adrian's old companion from Eton, stood warming his hands at the fire, his expression a mingling of sympathy and sly amusement. Outside, the rain had turned to sodden snow, the season's first, falling like pale ash from some ancient flame. "My lord," began Mr. Holloway, pushing his spectacles higher, "this is the last testament of Sir Thomas. In accordance with his wishes, we gather today to hear its terms once more and to affirm them. Since he has left this world near a year ago," Adrian murmured with a nod. "Pray, proceed." The lawyer's voice rolled deep and steady, words sounding like liturgy within a stone chapel. "The transfer of lands, hunting forests, shares at the southern docks, London townhouses, until, like a blade turned inward, came the clause all had known, yet none had spoken aloud. The Redwyck estate, entire and undivided, shall pass to my grandson, Adrian Redwyck, on the condition that before his 30th birthday he weds a woman who cherishes him for himself, not for title nor for wealth. Should this condition not be met, the whole shall fall into trust, and Redwyck Hall governed by stewards until such time as another worthy heir fulfills it." The fire leaped as though startled at the decree. Percival pressed his lips, and Mr. Holloway closed the will with care, resting his hands upon the coffer. The air thickened, as if a velvet curtain had been drawn down upon the room. "Your grandfather never did anything lightly," Percival remarked with half a smile. "He ever believed that endurance is founded upon hearts, not coffers," Adrian replied, his gray eyes turning to the portrait. "Or perhaps he believed in stern lessons." The solicitor cleared his throat. "My lord, the time is but a few months. Your betrothal to Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, perhaps it should be advanced without delay." Her name Evelyn rang in the chamber like a crystal note shattering upon glass. Adrian's gaze fell to the table where a faint scratch glimmered beneath the firelight. Her image returned, a candlelit ball, mirrored ceiling reflecting a midnight rose garden. She in a gown of pale silk blue, her white wrist brushing a crystal glass. Her eyes calm as an autumn lake, though whispers swelled about her family's decline. He had proposed beneath a wisteria arch, where the air carried the scent of damp grass and faint strains of music. She had nodded lightly, as a butterfly alighting upon destiny. Yet behind her gentle smile, what dwelt there? Trust, or the calculation of a house in ruin? The question slithered back each night like a snake through his cloak. "I shall keep to the course," Adrian said at length, turning from the portrait. "But not for the sake of the will." Percival arched a brow. "Then for what?" For the truth, Adrian's voice lowered, as though fire touched dry wood. "Between her and me, I must know what stands firm, the name Redwyck or a man, scarred and fallible, who yet holds to a promise." Beyond the window, wind stirred the oaks like cloaks of wandering knights. A raven perched upon the balustrade, beating its wings so snow fell in showers. Adrian glimpsed himself in the misted, glass-tall figure, coat upon broad shoulders, eyes steadfast yet uncertain. The scar along his jaw tightened, a silver thread reminding him that wounds may close, yet never leave the blood. "One more thing," said Mr. Holloway, drawing a small letter tied in dark blue ribbon. "A note from Viscount Ashbourne. He hopes the wedding may reflect the dignity of both houses, and hopes the Redwicks might extend assistance in matters less spoken of." Percival interjected with a wry smile. Adrian took the letter, but did not open it. Instead, he set it beside the falcon-handled paper knife and crossed to the shelf. From it, he drew a small wooden box, lifting its lid to reveal a single token, a silver falcon badge, edges worn, scarred by stone and storm. He closed his hand upon it, and memory surged mud scent, labored breath, a shadow drawing steel, and a girl of 16 with wide eyes in the rain. He had never told a soul, nor asked if those eyes belonged to Evelyn. Adrian Percival whispered, part pity, part caution, "Do not turn your heart to stone for the sake of a dead man's command." "I am no stone," Adrian returned, setting the badge back and closing the box. "I would have it beat yet, only for the right one." Noonlight brushed the gray roof, a pale gold threading through cloud. Mrs. Alderton entered with a tray, silver teapot, steaming, butter biscuits, orange marmalade. Such small things held families upright, like nails hidden beneath a stair. Unseen, yet without them, footsteps faltered. "I shall go to London next week," Adrian declared, pouring tea. "See Evelyn, speak of the wedding. And I would have her here, at Redwyck and Rain, in stone walls, before the fire and the weight of this house." Some truths show themselves only by firelight, not beneath chandeliers. Mr. Holloway inclined his head, his notebook catching a gleam. "It shall be arranged." Percival lifted his glass, tapping it gently. "So the old song plays again, love, honor, and the snares of hearts. But mind, Adrian, let it not become a game. Games end with winner and loser. Marriage demands to who reach the end together," Adrian finished softly, a smile as faint as mist. "I know." Outside, snow thickened, mantling the lion statues at the gate. The rosebed sleeping in winter, the gravel road leading down to summer's fairground. Redwyck Hall seemed to breathe, or perhaps it was but the wind through chimneys. In the kitchens, a barley stew simmered. In the stables, a chestnut foal snorted upon hay. In the attic, Lady Eleanor's old chest lay bound with faded ribbon. Within it, letters telling of a love once chosen for the heart, not the title. The day passed slow as him. At dusk, when crimson wine spilled across the sills, Adrian stepped onto the stone portico, snow settling upon his shoulders. He closed his eyes, hearing the ravens call from the oaks, the distant rumble of wheels bound for London. There, a young woman would soon step across a threshold in simple shoes, bearing a smile unbought and a gaze deep enough to pierce through the cloak of rank. "Redwyck," he whispered, as if swearing a vow. "If there be any magic left in fairy tales, it lies not in coffers, but in the hand that clasps one's own through the length of winter." And on the far horizon, the snow began once more to fall. Morning unfurled over London beneath a sky of tarnished silver. Carriages jostled for passage along rain-slick cobblestone boulevards, their wheels grinding the gravel in counterpoint to the cries of newsboys. The air was thick with the mingled scents of fresh bread from a corner shop, the musk of horses, and the smoke of cola perfume belonging to this city alone. Into such a scene stepped Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, alighting from her father's modest carriage, her hands encased in silk gloves frayed at the edges. Yet her posture remained upright, her gaze luminous, as though poverty itself had never been permitted to touch her pride. The Ashbournes' rented house on a narrow street near Cavendish Square was too humble to be called the dwelling of nobility. Its paint peeled from the wooden door, its curtains of plain cotton in place of silk. Yet within the little sitting room, where a few wilted flowers clung to life in a cracked vase, Viscount Ashbourne held himself upon an armchair, clad in a worn brocade coat, bearing still the air of a man accustomed to drawing rooms and noble halls. He had long since lost his wife, and then his fortune, but never the conviction that his daughter's marriage might restore the family's honor. "Evelyn," he said, his voice trembling with age and debts alike, "Lord Redwyck has sent his formal proposal. You know what this means for us?" Her eyes dropped to the threadbare rug. "I do, father. At Redwyck Hall, you need not count the candles, nor worry each meal. They say the Earl is a reserved man, but his station, his wealth I do not choose for station," Evelyn interjected gently, her voice calm yet firm. "If I accept, it is because I see in him something more. An integrity, a strength I may trust." The old man exhaled, his gaze upon her both proud and troubled. He knew well that the Ashbourne estate survived only in name. Many another young lady would seize such a chance for the title of countess. Yet he perceived in Evelyn a difference, a spirit not easily subdued by gold. That afternoon, Evelyn walked out with her maid, Agatha, beneath the canopy of ancient elms. Rows of red brick houses stretched with iron balconies like many outstretched arms. Children in simple dress played about a fountain, while ladies in wide gowns mounted carriages, shawls fluttering in the wind. Amidst the bustle, Evelyn moved apart, quiet, refined, her eyes blue as an autumn lake, observing the world without display. Within her, memory stirred unbidden. A night of rain, her carriage overturned by the roadside. Shouts of brigands, cold seeping through her gown. Then a horseman had come, wordless, scattering danger, wrapping his cloak about her shoulders. He vanished into the storm, leaving only a silver badge engraved with a falcon. 6 years she had kept it as treasure, and when first she met Adrian beneath chandeliers at a ball, seeing the familiar scar along his jaw, she had known fate had returned him. Yet she kept silent, waiting to see if he would remember. He had not. At dusk, a letter arrived. Adrian Redwyck invited Evelyn and her father to Redwyck Hall to speak of the wedding. The red wax seal, falcon-stamped, throbbed in her chest like a heartbeat. Agatha whispered, her eyes alight with mingled fear and delight, "Not everyone is summoned by the Earl himself, my lady. All London speaks of it." Evelyn only inclined her head, concealing her stirrings. She knew the journey would not be mere courtesy. Redwyck Hall, with its mossed stone walls and ancestral portraits, would prove the stage upon which her future and her family's would be settled. That night, in her small chamber lit by a wavering candle, Evelyn sat at an old wooden desk. In her hand, the tarnished silver badge gleamed with a chill light. Softly, she whispered, as though to herself, "Do you remember that storm, Lord Redwyck? Or am I but a lady in need of shelter to you?" Outside, the church bells tolled through London's fog, reminding her that destiny drew near with each peal, marking her steps into a tale whose ending, joy or sorrow, she could not yet discern. The first days of winter swept into Redwyckshire with skin-cutting winds, draping the misty hills in a shroud of white mourning, along the gravel path to Redwyck Hall's grand entrance. The lion statues stood cloaked in snow, mute sentinels of a bygone dynasty. Within, the fire burned steadily, yet its warmth could not dispel the somber air that hovered over the house. The great estate seemed to wait for a new play, and Adrian Redwyck was its master of stage. He had resolved, before binding his life, to Lady Evelyn Ashbourne he must be certain beyond all doubt. He would not repeat his father's fate, a man abandoned by a marriage built on the sand of ambition. The portrait of Sir Thomas upon the wall, eyes stern and unyielding, reminded Adrian of the inheritance's cruel condition. A wife must love him for himself, not for his fortune. But how to discern true love? "You mean to set a trap," Percival Harrow observed, twirling a crystal glass in the dim drawing-room where they sat. "To test a heart as one tests steel at the forge. Have you thought that such a game might leave a fracture never to be healed?" Adrian leaned upon the arm of his chair, gaze turned toward the misted window. "I cannot rely upon vows murmured, nor gentle looks exchanged at a ball. I must know, if all were lost, would she remain? If she turned away, I would count it as fate's mercy. And if she does not?" Percival pressed, half mocking, half concerned. Adrian's scarred hand clenched upon the chair. "Then, only then, might I trust in love." The very next morning, his orders were given. Certain servants were abruptly dismissed, leaving the corridors bereft of familiar steps. The great doors of the western wing were barred to save expense of heating. Chandeliers burned with but half their candles, so the once resplendent hall glimmered only by the hearth's uneven glow. In the dining room, the white cloth remained upon the table, yet the dishes were halved. "Let them whisper, Adrian," commanded the housekeeper, his voice as cold and hard as steel. "Let word of Redwyck's ruin run through the halls." "Yes, my lord," answered Mrs. Alderton, though her aged eyes betrayed unease. False papers were prepared with meticulous care, reports of losses. Ledgers awash in red. A letter from Mr. Holloway speaking of investments utterly vanished. Adrian read each line, adjusting details for realism, then set his signature. The inks spread across the page brought both a shiver and a strange release. As though he himself were stripping away his wealth to live a different life. By afternoon, wind from the oak forest rattled the windows, leaves whispering like conspirators. Adrian stood in the great hall, clothed not in tailored finery, but in a plain cloak. No lines of servants bowed to him now, only a few subdued faces. The whole tableau was staged to convey the illusion, a noble house on the brink of ruin. When the Ashbourne carriage, dark blue against the snow, appeared upon the road, Adrian's heart pounded like a war drum. He watched Evelyn descend. Though she wore only a modest travel gown of blue wool, she appeared as though painted in oil, serene, poised, her golden hair gathered beneath a bonnet, stray curls falling against her pale face. She curtsied in the hall, her voice clear, though touched with curiosity. "My Lord Redwyck Hall seems quieter than when last we met." Adrian inclined his head, extending his hand in welcome. "Pray follow me, Lady Evelyn. There is a matter I must confide." In the library, lit only by firelight, Adrian unveiled his tragedy. He spoke of failed ventures, creditors clamoring, and ended with deliberate slowness. The Redwyck fortune is gone. All that remains is this house, and even it is mortgaged." Time seemed to freeze. Evelyn sat composed, her gloved hands folded in her lap. Surprise flickered in her eyes, yet no horror, no despair. Adrian waited, breath taut, braced for rejection. Instead, Evelyn raised her gaze, blue eyes steady as a winter lake. Her voice was calm, resolute. "Then we shall rebuild from ashes, my lord." Adrian started. He had braced for tears, cold silence, even refusal. But her words fell like snowsoft, yet weighty as stone. Something stirred within him, not triumph, but a confusion tinged with shame. "Lady Evelyn, do you comprehend what I have said?" His question was rough. "I do," she replied, her eyes brighter than the fire. "I do not promise to turn stone to gold. But I know how to keep the hearth aflame, how to trim without robbing a home of warmth. The daughter of a fallen house learns such things young." Silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of logs. Percival, standing in shadow by the door, curved his mouth as if to speak, but held back. Adrian, stiff upon his chair, felt himself, for the first time, displaced. Should he rejoice that Evelyn had passed the trial, or fear her answer was too firm, too unswayed, unlike the trembling response of a fragile girl? "You have your answer," Percival murmured later, as he left with Adrian to grant Evelyn her rest after the journey. "And yet, why do you look unpleased?" Adrian's gaze lingered upon the fire, shadows of ancestors flickering across the wall. "Because, Percival, I do not know whether she loves me or only the trial I have laid before her." Outside, the wind howled through the oaks. Fresh snow fell heavier still, as though to cover truths yet hidden within those stone walls. The first days of Evelyn's stay at Redwyck Hall passed beneath a winter sky as heavy as velvet drawn across the hills. Winds whistled through the ancient oaks, their song mournful. While in the great hall, the hearth's flame flickered, casting its light upon carved timbers darkened by centuries. Her footsteps echoed softly along vast corridors where chandeliers once blazed. Now only a handful of candles dared to glow. Evelyn uttered no complaint. She asked not why the dining table, stretching 10 yards, bore only a modest fare. Nor did she question the absence of the familiar household staff, leaving but a handful of weary faces. She smiled gently at her maid Agatha and observed in silence. In her calm blue eyes, Redwyck Hall was not merely a great house in decline, but a home awaiting one who would tend its flame at dawn. When mist still clung to the lawns, Evelyn sat in the small account room beside the library, turning the pages of ledgers thick with dust. Columns of red ink sprawled like bloodstains, yet she did not flinch. "My lady," Agatha exclaimed, "this is not work for a future countess." "Leave it to Lord Redwyck." Evelyn shook her head, voice gentle but firm. "No, Agatha. A house is not sustained by stone and timber alone. It lives because someone keeps its warmth alive. If I am to dwell here, my first duty is to learn how to guard its fire." By noon, when Adrian entered the dining hall, he found Evelyn beside Mrs. Alderton, conferring with the cook. Rather than elaborate dishes, she proposed a fare both simple and refined: barley soup, bread toasted with herb butter, a little cured meat, and apples baked with cinnamon. Such food did not diminish the dignity of the table, but infused it with warmth and intimacy. "You do not mind that I cannot offer lavish banquets?" Adrian asked, his tone edged with doubt. Evelyn lifted her gaze, steady and tender. "Splendor feeds only the eyes. Consideration feeds the heart. My Lord Redwyck Hall shall never lack for respect, if we preserve that." He fell silent, struck by how naturally she claimed command of circumstance. She was nothing like the trembling maiden he had half expected. In her slender hands, the castle no longer seemed a fortress in decline, but a hearth stirring to life once more. The next day, Evelyn descended to the laundry. where heaps of linen lay awaiting repair. She sat among the maids, taking needle and thread. At first, her stitches faltered, but beneath the golden flicker of candlelight, she laughed at her own clumsiness and learned. Her laughter spread, brightening the room until it felt like a feast. The servants marveled. Never had they seen a lady so willing to stoop and share their burden. Word traveled swiftly. Through Redwyck Hall, the future countess neither complained nor recoiled, but set her hands to the rhythm of the household. Mrs. Alderton whispered to a fellow servant, "Perhaps Redwyck has at last found its mistress." That evening, as Adrian passed the corridor, he glimpsed a door ajar. Within, Evelyn bent over a desk, writing by oil lamp. He paused, her slender form inclined over the wooden table. Golden hair slipping over her shoulders, lamplight tracing the curve of her cheek. Upon the paper lay neat lines, a plan for reduced expenses, a list of valuables to be sold, and even allowances set aside for scholarships to village children. "Lady Evelyn," he spoke, entering. She lifted her face, smiling softly. "I thought, if we must begin from ashes, then let us build a house of worth not only for this family, but for those who live beneath its shadow." Adrian was struck still. He had staged a play to test loyalty, never imagining she would transform his fiction into a living design for hope. That night, in his chamber, he sat alone before the fire, a glass of brandy untouched in his hand. Percival's words echoed in memory. "Perhaps she truly loves you. Or perhaps she loves the very trial you devised. Either way, it is you who stand tested." Adrian stared into the flames, and for the first time in the proud heart of the Earl arose a shadow of fear. Was it he, not she, who had been summoned to answer destiny's question? The north wind howled through the narrow windows of Redwyck Hall, its cry long and mournful, as if summoning memories from the grave. In a chamber warmed only just enough, Evelyn sat by the casement, her fingers toying with a chain hidden beneath her gown. Candlelight revealed the keepsake of silver engraved with a falconly emblem of Redwyck. She had guarded it for 6 long years, proof that once, in a night steeped in peril, a man had risked his life to save her. That night lived in her mind with cruel clarity. The mountain road of Witherford drowned in rain. The carriage broken, the driver senseless, herself trembling in a torn gown. Bandits closed in, their laughter harsh, their weapons clashing. Then out of the storm had come a horseman tall, resolute, his sword scattering danger. He had wrapped her in his cloak, lifted her to the saddle, and carried her away in silence. Only one sentence had he spoken: "You matter to no one, my lady." Yet the falcon badge he dropped had spoken volumes. Now, each time Evelyn saw the scar running along Adrian's jaw, she knew beyond doubt he was that very man. He had forgotten or chosen not to remember. She, however, remained silent, waiting for the day he might recall. The following morning, in Redwyck's library, Adrian found her sorting old volumes. Light streamed down from the high windows, wrapping her figure in a haze like mist. "Lady Evelyn," he began, entering slowly, "I must confess, you have changed this house. I have never seen it so alive." She smiled faintly, her hand resting upon a spine. "I merely brought old habits with me. When Mother died, Father drowned in grief. Had I not learned to keep our household, Ashbourne would have fallen to ruin." He stood silent, moved by something between pity and admiration. He had thought her a fragile girl, yet she had borne burdens like a mistress of a state. But her next words struck him still. "The storm at Witherford taught me another lesson." Adrian's head snapped up. Her calm blue eyes were fixed on him, serene yet piercing. "I was but 16 then. I lost all carriage coin, even safety. If not for a stranger who came that night, I should not be here." Blood surged in his veins. Old fragments returned. The stench of mud, rain lashing his cloak, the frightened yet unyielding eyes of a girl. His hand gripped the chair as though to still himself. "You still remember." His voice was low, hoarse. "How could I forget?" Evelyn's fingers brushed the chain beneath her gown. "I never knew his name. Only that he left behind a keepsake." She paused, then lowered her gaze. A silver badge carved with a falcon. Adrian's heart clenched. He knew it well, the very token he had lost. Yet, instead of confessing, he turned aside, concealing the fire in his eyes. A stranger, nothing more. Not worth clinging to. Evelyn shook her head firmly. "No. From that night, I learned a man's worth lies not in fortune, but in deeds. One who shields the weak without thought of reward. That is the man I would call husband." Silence enveloped the chamber, broken only by the moan of wind through glass. Pride wrestled with shame in Adrian's chest. Pride, for he was indeed the man she spoke of. Shame, for now he deceived her with a cruel masquerade. That evening, Percival arrived bearing French wine and his usual wit. Yet on seeing Adrian brooding by the fire, he frowned. "What troubles you, Redwyck? Has she shaken you so?" Adrian swirled the glass, voice heavy. "She knows of Witherford." Percival's brows rose. "The carriage raid. So it was you who played knight that night. No wonder she is steadfast." "You do not understand," Adrian muttered. "If her devotion rests only upon gratitude, what love is there?" Percival chuckled softly, though his eyes grew grave. "Perhaps it is you who are indebted, Adrian. Not for saving Herb, for failing, ever since, to learn trust." The words lingered in the air, curling about him like smoke that refused to disperse. Adrian realized the trial he had contrived to test Evelyn was becoming a mirror, reflecting his own frailty. Outside, the night rain began to fall, drumming upon Redwyck's windows. Evelyn sat within her chamber, clutching the silver badge, vowing she would not abandon this house. And Adrian, in the dark, traced his old scar and wondered, in the end, who was it that fate truly placed upon trial? White Shroud. In that stillness, Redwyck Hall stood like a castle forgotten by time. Its only resistance against the frost, the glow of the hearth. Yet in this harshest of winters, Evelyn began to breathe a new rhythm into the ancient house. She rose before dawn, long before the sun could pierce the gray heavens. With Mrs. Alderton at her side, Evelyn walked the estate, room by room, storeroom by storeroom. She wrote with meticulous hand which chambers should be shut to save coal, which heirlooms might be sent to auction, which expenses trimmed. At first, the servants regarded her with doubt, but gradually her composure and quiet skill persuaded them. In the kitchen, she did not hesitate to roll up her sleeves, working beside the cook to devise meals both modest and filling. A pot of vegetable broth laced with herbs replaced elaborate beef stews. Dark loaves of bread took the place of sugared confections. Yet, when these were served, no one found them lacking. For the warmth of her presence and the ease of her conversation turned the table into joy. "My lady," Mrs. Alderton whispered, standing close to her in the kitchen, "what you have done, it has brought life to this house. Not for years has laughter filled these hearths." Evelyn smiled, wiping flour from her hands. "A home cannot survive on gold and silver, Mrs. Alderton. It breathes through the hands and hearts of those within." Meanwhile, Adrian watched, silent, from the shadows. He saw Evelyn speaking kindly with the servants, listening to their grievances, even sewing beside them by candlelight. He saw her consulting with Mr. Holloway on renegotiating rents with tenants, and later riding down to the village herself to bargain with smiths and grain merchants for fairer prices. One evening, as dusk swallowed the sleeping rose gardens, Adrian encountered her returning from the village. Mud clung to her gown, her hands trembled from cold, yet her eyes shone bright. She placed a ledger in his hands. "I have reordered the accounts," she said firmly. If followed, the hall may reduce its costs by a third without loss of dignity. She paused, then drew forth a small box. "I have sold a few jewels. Not much, but enough to meet the most urgent debts." Adrian stared. "You need not have done this. They were yours." Evelyn met his gaze, her blue eyes clear yet resolute. "If I have chosen to stay, then every burden is ours, not yours alone." Something tightened in his chest. Her answer was no act of submission, nor blind sacrifice. It radiated dignity and strength, leaving him bereft of words. That night, Adrian sat in the library with a glass of brandy, untouched. Percival arrived, bringing the cold with him and an uncharacteristically grave expression. "You have your proof, Adrian. She has stayed. She has sold her jewels. She steers this house like its true mistress. What more do you need to believe she loves you?" Adrian gave a bitter laugh, raising but not drinking his glass. "Do you not see? She does it all too easily. No tears, no hesitation. At times I wonder, does she remain out of love for me, or merely to defy misfortune?" Percival frowned. "You fear her strength more than her absence. Do you not see? This trial is no longer hers, it's yours." The words fell like a stone into frozen water. Adrian stared into the dying fire. His scarred face reflected in the ember's eyes clouded with doubt such as he had never known dot in her chamber. Evelyn sat by the window, her hand wrapped tightly around the silver badge hidden beneath her gown. She knew Adrian watched her every step, yet felt the wall he raised between them. Perhaps he did not trust, perhaps he feared. But to her, love was never a game. Softly she whispered to herself, voice faint as wind against the pane, "If he will not see, then truth itself shall compel him." Outside, snow fell again, cloaking the gardens, erasing every trace. But within Redwyck Hall, the fire was kept alight by new hands, the hands of Evelyn. Not yet its mistress in name, but already transforming the frozen castle into a home. The wind lashed against the windows, moaning like ancestral whispers. At Redwyck Hall, snow piled upon the eaves, its glare casting the corridors in a cold, white glow. Evelyn returned from the village, her arms laden with ledgers and cloth for the servants. Mud stained her gown, yet her eyes shone bright, blue and clear as a winter sky. She thought of the plan she would present to Adrian for restoring the estate. She thought of his rare smile the night before, like the sun-piercing cloud. But as she passed the library, Evelyn heard Adrian's voice. The door stood ajar, and each word fell like the cut of a blade. 3 weeks, Percival," Adrian said, heavy with doubt. Not once has she complained. She sold her jewels. She manages every meal. And still I cannot be certain. Does she do it out of love, or some strange will to conquer trial? Percival's hoarse laugh rang out. "You've staged an entire charade, Adrian. You feigned ruin, dismissed your servants, shut a wing of the house all to test the heart of one woman. Is that not enough?" The basket slipped from Evelyn's hands, crashing to the stone floor. Adrian's voice dropped, torn and raw. "My grandfather set the condition. I must know she loves me, not the fortune. I cannot repeat my father's mistake abandoned for lack of gold. I need certainty." Breath left Evelyn's body. Each stitch she had sewn, each coin she had saved, each drop of sweat all reduced to a cruel play. She was no keeper of the flame, but a bird in a cage, observed to see if she would sing on cue. She pushed open the door. Cloth spilled across the floor like witnesses to truth unveiled. Adrian turned, face paling. Percival rose, uncertain whether to retreat. But Evelyn's voice cut sharp as steel. "Stay, Lord Harrow. If I have been made a spectacle, let there at least be a witness. Adrian reached toward her, pleading. Evelyn, let me explain. No need. Her eyes blazed. I understand. The empty halls, the vanished servants, the ruin of fortune, all a play of your design. Not to shield me, but to test me, as one tests a horse before purchase. His scar tightened along his jaw. I only wished to be sure that your love for me was true. Sure. Evelyn's laugh was bitter as frost. You do not seek love, Adrian. You seek an examination, one who passes your snares, to whom you will then award your heart. Do you call that love? No. It is doubt, robed in honor. Percival cleared his throat, but Evelyn stepped forward, drawing from her gown the silver chain. The falcon badge struck the table, ringing sharp. Do you know why I accepted your hand? She asked, her voice trembling yet clear. Not for fortune, nor title, but because 6 years ago, on the storm-swept road of Witherford, a man saved me from brigands. He asked no name, no reward, leaving only this token. I believed such a brave, noble soul was you. Adrian froze. His hand shook as he beheld the token he had lost. Words pressed in his throat, yet died unspoken. Evelyn's gaze met his eyes, wet yet unwavering. I was mistaken. That man saved me by deed. But you cage me in suspicion. Love is not a test to be passed, my lord. It is a gift entrusted in faith. And you have crushed that gift in your hands. She slipped the betrothal ring from her finger, laying it beside the badge. Then she turned. Her steps rang firm upon the stone, hammer blows upon Adrian's heart. He reached out, his voice breaking. Evelyn, please. Hear my I love you. At the doorway, she paused, a bitter smile on her lips. Love. Or only love for the thought that I endured your trial. Tell me, Adrian, what difference is there? Then she was gone, her blue gown sweeping the floor, leaving Adrian collapsed upon the table, his head in his hands. Upon the wood, the falcon badge and the ring glimmered in the firelight, testimony to a love shattered within Redwyck Hall's ancient walls. Outside, the storm gathered. Redwyck Hall shuddered, as though even its stones knew they had borne witness to something that could never be undone. In the days after Evelyn left Redwyck Hall, the snow fell heavier than ever. The entire valley lay buried in a mournful white, and within the ancient castle the air was as cold as a tomb. Long corridors, once merely quiet, now echoed with Adrian's solitary footsteps. Each sound unanswered. The ring she had cast aside still lay upon the library table, beside the silver badge. Each time Adrian beheld them, it was as though the chill of metal pierced his heart. He would stand for long minutes before them, his hand trembling to touch, then drawing back unable to put them away, for he knew they were no longer keepsakes, but proof of a trust betrayed. A week later, Percival returned to Redwyck Hall, his face grim. He strode into the library, his voice heavy. Are you satisfied now, Adrian? The trial is complete, and the price you paid was the only woman willing to stand with you through the storm. Adrian did not answer. He sat by the fire, dark circles beneath his eyes. In his hand was an unfinished letter, the 10th he had written to Evelyn, none ever sent. In it he confessed all, his cowardice, his fear of abandonment, his true love. Yet each time he tore it apart, pride whispering, if she does not trust, no words will avail. Percival studied him, then sighed. Do you even know where she has gone? Adrian shook his head, his voice hoarse. I only know she left in the night, back to her father. But she will not see me again. Perhaps that is for the best, Percival replied, though his tone softened. Adrian, Evelyn never needed a castle nor a fortune. She needed a man who could trust, and you with all your wealth could not give her that. In the days that followed, Adrian tried to trace her steps. He rode through the oak woods, asked at every tenant's cottage. Each one shook their head. They had only seen Lady Ashbourne pass. Her bearing calm, though her eyes were red dot at Ashbourne Manor. He was stopped at the gate. Viscount Ashbourne, gaunt yet proud, stood upon the steps, his gaze as cold as ice. "You shall not see my daughter," he declared. "She returned in tears, and I will not allow any man to make her weep again." Adrian bowed his head, his heart twisting. "My lord, I was wrong. I only wished to tell her you had your chance to speak by deed." The Viscount cut him short. "You chose deceit. For a woman like Evelyn, trust outweighs all. Leave her in peace." The wooden door shut, leaving Adrian alone in the bitter wind. He looked up at the windows, their panes faintly aglow, and wondered if she watched him from behind. But no shadow stirred. Back at Redwyck Hall, he drowned in remorse. The wings he had closed to feign economy were opened again, candles lit, the dining table restored to grandeur. Yet all only revealed emptiness more keenly. Without Evelyn, even brilliance was shadow. One night, as snow smothered all sound, Adich sat in the library, writing once more. This letter he did not tear. "Evelyn, you spoke true. Love is no examination. It is a gift, and I have trampled it. If ever I might, I would surrender all wealth to earn but one more chance of your faith. If not, then I shall spend the rest of my days atoning for the doubt that slew us." He signed his name, but did not send it. Instead, he placed the letter in the drawer beneath Sir Thomas's portrait. Let the man who had set the cruel condition be witness to his repentance. The next day, when the wind lay still, Adrian went to see Mrs. Hartley, Evelyn's old governess. Her cottage by the frozen lake was warm with the scent of herbal tea. The silver-haired woman regarded him with pity and reproach. "I know why you are here, not for me," she said, pouring his cup. "Evelyn came last week. She spoke not of you, yet I saw the pain in her eyes. She trusted you, Adrian, and you squandered the gift." He bowed his head, voice breaking. "I do not know how to win it back." Mrs. Hartley laid her hand upon the table, her words slow and solemn. "Trust cannot be bought with fortune, nor reclaimed with speeches. Only through deeds, repeated and enduring, until her heart knows the wound bleeds no more. Have you the courage for such patience?" Adrian raised his eyes, a glimmer of resolve awakening. For the first time, he thought not of inheritance, nor of his grandfather, nor of honor. He thought only of Evelyn, the girl who had mended linens, cooked simple meals, and turned Redwyck Hall into a home. He knew then, without her, estate and title were ashes. Outside, snow still fell. But within Adrian's heart, a new determination was kindled. He would atone not by trials, but by the steadfastness of true love. The snowstorm had passed, leaving the valley of Redwyckshire in a blinding white. Snow lay thick upon the stone lions at the gate, clung to every roof tile and window pane, making Redwyck Hall seem like a castle sprung from the pages of a fairy tale. Yet within Adrian Redwyck's heart there was no enchantment, only emptiness and a mounting tension. His 30th birthday drew near, and with it, the final deadline of the merciless will in the library. The fire burned red, casting its glow upon Adrian's careworn face. Before him lay an unfinished letter to Evelyn. The words wavering with hesitation. "If I beg anything of you, it is this, that you allow me to prove myself through deeds, not through the foolish trials I once contrived." He stopped, sighed, and crushed the paper in his fist. Writing was useless now, when trust lay broken. Mr. Holloway, the aged solicitor, arrived on a fog-laden morning. Setting down his leather case, his eyes gleamed behind his spectacles. "My lord, tomorrow marks your 30th year. Should you remain unwed, the estate will fall into trust. What is your decision?" Adrian straightened, though his voice was hoarse. "I will renounce it." The lawyer started. My lord, I have prepared a letter of formal abdication, Adrian continued, rising to stand by the window, gazing out at the oak forest veiled in snow. What meaning has a fortune when it has driven me to suspicion, deceit, and the loss of the only woman worth keeping? Mr. Holloway hesitated, but the firmness in Adrian's eyes silenced him. That afternoon, Percival arrived, shaking snow from his cloak, his face tight from the cold. He strode into the chamber with a heavy stare. "I hear you mean to renounce all. Adrian, have you lost your senses?" Adrian gave a faint laugh, edged with bitterness. "Mad, perhaps. Yet for the first time I feel peace. I am weary of living beneath the shadow of a will, of my grandfather, of the doubts inherited from my father. If by losing all I may keep some fragment of honor, then I am willing." Percival was silent long, then sighed. "And Evelyn?" Her name fell like a blade into Adrian's heart. He turned toward the fire, voice low. "I know not if she can forgive. But if she should learn I chose her above inheritance, perhaps at least she will understand." That night, Adrian did not sleep. He walked the corridors by candlelight, his shadow stretching against the gray stone. Above him, the portrait of Sir Thomas Redwyck seemed to gaze down, stern eyes demanding, "Will you dare place love above the legacy of generations?" He paused before the door of the chamber Evelyn had once occupied. The room stood empty, bed neatly made, dressing table bare as though she had never set foot there. He lingered long, feeling as if her steps still echoed, her silken gown brushing the stones. Adrian whispered, his voice trembling, "Evelyn, I was wrong. If I could, I would give all to be trusted once more." At dawn, Adrian entered the library, prepared to sign the letter of renunciation. Mr. Holloway awaited, papers neatly arrayed. Outside, the snow dripped from the eaves, each drop striking frozen ground with a hollow note. He lifted the pen, drew a breath, but then a knock at the door. Mrs. Alderton entered, her aged face lit with something rare. "My lord," she said, her voice quivering, "a guest arrived in the night. It is Lady Evelyn Ashbourne." The pen fell from Adrian's grasp, clattering to the floor. Blood surged in his chest, choking his breath. Where is she?" "In the small drawing room, my lord." Without cloak or hat, Adrian rushed down the corridor, his heart pounding. He threw open the door, and there, in the pale morning light, Evelyn stood before the hearth, her back turned. Snow still clung to her cloak, golden hair falling loose about her shoulders. At the sound of his steps, she turned. Her eyes, calm yet kindled with quiet fire, met his. "Happy birthday, Lord Redwyck," she said softly. Adrian halted, scarcely believing she stood here in Redwyck Hall upon the very day of fate. Every word he had prepared dissolved upon his tongue. Silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Evelyn removed her gloves and laid them upon the table. "I have not returned for fortune, nor for the will. I have come to see whether you have learned the lesson you sought to teach me with your trial." Adrian stepped closer, his gaze burdened with remorse. "I have learned, Evelyn. Love is no examination. It is a gift I betrayed. But today I am ready to surrender all, lonely to be trusted once more." Her eyes lingered upon him, blue depths shifting like a lake beneath the wind. Then Evelyn spoke, slow and clear. "Then prove it. Not with deceit, but with truth." The fire leaped higher, casting their faces in light. And in that moment, Adrian knew. The final choice was not between fortune and love, but between fear and trust. And this time, he was ready. That morning, winter sunlight pierced through the silver mist, melting the heavy snow around Redwyck Hall. The ancient oaks, burdened with frost, now glittered like crystal beneath the light. The stillness of the air seemed solemn, as if awaiting a proclamation within the old house. Candles burned bright in the small chapel on the eastern wing. It was here that generations of Redwicks had held baptisms and family prayers. Today, it bore witness to a wedding simple in form, yet laden with all the truth Adrian had once lost and now resolved to keep. Mrs. Alderton adjusted the veil upon Evelyn's hair. Her gown was not silk-stitched with pearls as society ladies adored, but soft, muslin, modest, yet radiant. When she moved, the light transformed her into a figure of purity and quiet pride. "He is changed, my lady," whispered the housekeeper, eyes glistening. "And more than that, he is changed because of you." Evelyn gave a small nod, her blue eyes alight with newly restored faith. In the chapel, Adrian waited. He wore only a gray cloak, no jewels, no golden coronet. His heart beat fiercely, yet his gaze was steady. He had signed the letter renouncing his inheritance, though he never sent it. For the moment Evelyn stepped back into the hall, he knew fortune had become but a shadow. What mattered now was the truth of this day. As Evelyn entered, the creak of the wooden floorboards echoed in the silent chapel. Light streamed through the high window, wrapping her in a tender halo. Adrian drew a deep breath, stepping forward. They met at the center. Beneath the gentle smile of the old priest, the vows were spoken without splendor, without throngs of witnesses. Only Percival, Mrs. Alderton, and Agnes, Evelyn's loyal maid, stood by. Yet in that simplicity, every word resounded more deeply than the grandest ceremony. Not for wealth, not for title, only for love, for trust, and for the promise of a lifetime together. When Adrian slid the ring upon Evelyn's hand, the very ring she once cast aside, both trembled. She looked up at him and whispered, "This time, it is no trial." He bent, pressing his lips gently to her brow. "Never again, Evelyn. From now on, only truth." That afternoon, the wind calmed, the snow ceased. Redwyck Hall opened its doors not to flaunt riches, but to welcome the villagers. Adrian and Evelyn, hand in hand, invited them into the great hall for a humble feast: toasted bread, hot cider, and garden stew. None spoke of fortune or wills. All they saw was the young Earl's gaze upon his bride. Full of reverence and unfeigned love, a tenant's little daughter approached shyly, offering Evelyn a bundle of wild violets. "My lady, these are the first flowers to bloom after the storm." Evelyn gathered the child in her arms, smiling. In that moment she knew. This house, Redwyck Hall, had finally become a place of life, not a monument of cold stone. Percival stood aside, shaking his head lightly, though his eyes shone. "You have triumphed, Adrian. Not over your grandfather's will, but over yourself." Adrian answered, clasping his wife's hand. "No, I have not triumphed. We have found something beyond victory." 5 years later, on the spring lawns of Redwyck Hall, children's laughter rang. A golden-haired girl, Eleanor, ran across the grass, holding aloft the silver badge upon a chain, the keepsake her mother had once treasured. "Father, I am the knight who shall protect Mother," she cried. Beside her, her little brother James toddled. Stumbling and laughing, Dot Evelyn stood upon the stone steps, her pale blue gown fluttering in the breeze. Adrian came from within, a light cloak over his shoulders. He slipped his arm around her waist as together they watched their children at play. In his eyes was no shadow of doubt, only peace. "Do you ever regret?" Adrian asked softly, a smile upon his lips, though his voice trembled. Evelyn leaned against him. "Only one thing, that it took us so long for you to understand. Yet perhaps it was needed, so we might know this love is steadfast." The spring wind carried the scent of violets across the threshold. Redwyck Hall was no longer a fortress of trials, but a home, a hearth, a family, where love was built from ruins to endure forever, and within Adrian's heart, one truth stood firm: fortune may be lost, but the love Evelyn had given him, love without trials, without suspicion, was the most precious legacy he would ever hold. Thank you for listening with Snail Story. If this story touched your heart, please hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment to share your thoughts. Your companionship is the flame that keeps us going, bringing you more slow, heartfelt, and healing stories.